march of time.
Hello. Hello, Trans-Pacific operator. This is the Australian legation in Washington. Emerson, 4900. That's right. I'd like to put in an overseas call to Canberra, Australia. That's right. Canberra, 501. Thank you very much.
Half a world away from the battlefronts of Europe and Africa is an important and dangerous theater of war, the Pacific Ocean.
Go ahead, Honolulu. We're waiting.
Hello, Manila. Hello, Manila. The Navy Department at Washington is calling Admiral Hart at the Naval Base. Is he there, please?
White House. I have Ambassador Groove. One moment, please. Go ahead, Tokyo.
Is this the Australian legation? On your call to Canberra, we are ready. One moment.
12,000 miles from London, 10,000 from Washington, only 3,000 from Tokyo is the Commonwealth of Australia, one of 4 of the great overseas dominions in the British Commonwealth of Nations. From its 7 million people, less than the population of New York City, Australia has already created for the second time in one generation a powerful military force for Britain's aid. Today, 1 Australian in 7 of military age is in uniform, and 125,000 of these men have already gone overseas. Other thousands are in training. And today, with Axis partner Japan moving steadily southward, the people of Australia know that they must prepare the homeland itself to resist invasion. One Axis power has already felt the fighting strength of the men from down under. To aid in the offensive against the Italians in Libya, Australians long used to desert sun and sand have been brought through the Indian Ocean and the Suez Canal to join the British Army in Egypt. Renewing the First World War tradition of the tough and cocky Anzacs, Australian New Zealand Army Corps, they have taken part in every action of the British offensive against the Italian army in North Africa. Putting into effect the lessons of blitzkrieg strategy the British command had learned at such great cost in France and Belgium, Wavell's Army of the Nile drove fast and hard into Libya. In the drive to Bardia alone, close to 100,000 Italians, nearly half of Marshal Graziani's veteran fighters, were made prisoner. Living rebuttals of the rumors spread among Italians by Nazi propagandists that Australians never took prisoners alive. Though last of Britain's overseas dominions to be settled, Australia is today a busy and thriving country. Its coastal cities, clean and modern, their population clings to the tradition which makes English outdoor sports the symbol of Australian life. Through July winters and January summers, Australian life has flowed calmly and democratically on, as well ordered as in the distant mother country. And winter or summer, the Australian climate permits an uninterrupted enjoyment of open-air life. Like the Englishman, the Australian's home is his castle, and the tradition of a pioneer country centers everything on home and friends and family. Even families of modest means are able to own their own homes, in most cases with the help of government home purchase plans. From the days of its first settlers, the nation has established and maintained high standards of education, today free and compulsory for every boy and girl. A practical people, they have long known the value of grounding youth in the basic sciences. For in a land where millions of acres are not yet fully exploited, every child may hope to make his way, create and develop in the future the civilization of a great empire within an empire. Symbol of the indestructible bond between the British Crown and the Australian Commonwealth is the personal representative of the King, His Majesty's Governor-General, Lord Gowrie of Canberra and Durlton. But the governing power of the Commonwealth and its island dependencies is the Parliament, where representatives of each Australian state have for 4 decades been masters of their country's policies and social progress. Chosen by the parliamentary majority as Prime Minister and Executive Chief of Australia is Robert Gordon Menzies, Liberal leader of the United Australia Party. Collaborating on the great national issues is opposition leader John Curtin, Labour's great standard bearer. In the Australian Senate, Labour and Conservatives have almost equal voice, as all parties face the realities of the tremendous war effort which a relatively small and isolated people are making in 1941. Keynote of Australian policy has been that the nation, the British Empire and democracy must be defended, not on a single front, but on all fronts, that no sacrifice of money and effort can be too great. To coordinate Australia's war effort, vast responsibility is vested in the War Council, directed by the Prime Minister. Its membership representing Labour, industry, and all political parties. From this body comes the initiative for war projects, the guidance for the war effort. On recommendation of the War Council, into the Australian bush, the untracked interior, have gone gangs of engineers and labourers to clear land for military airfields, to build a great transcontinental highway. Within the past few months, mobilization for home defense has been accelerated than at any time during the First World War. Thousands of them are sons of the original Anzacs, eager to carry on the traditions of that famous corps. As important as big armies to the modern nations at war are economic resources. And from the beginning of hostilities, Australia has been a vast storehouse and supply depot of raw materials for all Britain. For the duration of the war, its beef and mutton and its entire wool clip, 1/4 of the world's supply, are being shipped to the British Isles to fill urgent wartime needs. Besides supplying Britain, Australia has been meeting the growing emergency requirements of its own industries. And to a nation barely out of its pioneering stages, war is bringing an industrial expansion bound to affect its whole future. Out of its huge iron deposits, Australia is supplying the requirements of a full-fledged munitions industry, already big enough to meet Dominion needs, and in addition to provide an effective surplus for export to Britain. Proud of the speed and efficiency of its munitions industry, Australia has set a pattern for other bigger and more powerful nations to follow. Dependent on Britain in the First World War for even the guns its soldiers carried, Australia is today almost entirely self-sufficient in meeting the needs of World War II. With planes almost unobtainable in world markets, Australia's infant aircraft industry is turning out light bombers and fighters. And today, employers and workers alike have subordinated everything to a dual objective: Australia's defense and full aid to Britain. As World War II rounds out its second year, Australia's war spirit and the will for victory run high.
They brought this lad before the general, and the general said, "Attention, prisoner, I am General Gorgonzola." And the lad said, "How do you do, General Gorgonzola?" And at that, the general's whiskers bristled up and down, and he said, "What insolence! Even this man knows that Gorgonzola is a piece of cheese." And the lad said, "No offense intended, General. You know, news travels fast these days."
Sharing in the glory of Mediterranean victories is His Majesty's Royal Australian Navy, today in full service with the battle fleets of Britain. But along with its victories, Australia is concerned with the hard fact that without the aid of Britain's battle fleets, its own light cruisers and destroyers would be no match for Japan. To meet its naval expansion and to provide for its newly building corvettes and armed merchant cruisers, Australia has ordered the tripling of its naval personnel. And by 1942, the Royal Australian Navy will have greatly increased its defensive force in the South Pacific. Ready to match the feats of any World War ace are the 30,000 men of the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAAF, who are preparing to take their places in defense of their homeland and the British Empire. In 1941, with their home defense forces overwhelmingly outnumbered on land, in the air, and at sea, in case of attack by Japan, Australia's own military strategists know that in an emergency, the Dominion of Australia would face a fight against odds which it alone could not hope to overcome. But Australia knows that in the same South Pacific, it has many friends and potential allies. A few hundred miles away is its closest ally, the Dutch East Indies, long coveted by Japan for its wealth in oil, rubber, and tin. Guarding these islands today is a formidable force of native troops, officered by refugee Dutch colonials who have good reason to detest the Nazi-Japanese Axis. Here, the determined Dutch, since the invasion of Holland, have equipped themselves to fight a delaying action if the Japanese fleet moves south. 2,000 miles to the north is Britain's Far Eastern naval base, Singapore. Big enough to berth the British and United States navies, its 2,400 acres of docks and shops make up the main base of Britain's Asiatic fleet. Defended on land by 50,000 regulars, Singapore's garrison has been reinforced by fresh divisions from the Indian Army. And today, this crossroads of empire is Britain's bulwark against any Japanese move. Within eyeshot of Japan's army in South China is Britain's crown colony of Hong Kong. Moored in its heavily mined harbor is a squadron of British men of war, And though Hong Kong is defended by an army of only 20,000 fighting men, 5 times its peacetime strength, its coastline bristles with gun emplacements and concealed fortifications. Today, Hong Kong, like Gibraltar and Malta, is prepared to stand off a long siege. And two, directly in the path of Japanese expansion, stand the Philippine Islands. Today, a possession of the one nation Japan fears most, the United States. Today, the defense forces in the islands, native and American, total more than 200,000 men. Based around Manila Bay, at Cavite and Rizal, are squadrons of U.S. Army and Navy bombers, capable, if necessary, of executing a bombing mission as far as Tokyo. But it is upon an island group 5,000 miles away that Australia must rely most if Japan decides to strike. Since 1931, when Japan first invaded China on her march of destiny, the mere presence of the U.S. Navy at Hawaii has been enough to discourage the Japanese from extending their empire to the South Pacific. But in 1941, Imperial Japan has new allies, Fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. And today, 12,000 miles from London, 10,000 miles from Washington, and but 3,000 miles from Tokyo, many Australians fear that 1941 has been chosen by militarist Japan as its year of opportunity. They fear that in 1941, for the first time since their land was settled, the Australian people may have to defend themselves from invasion. But in spite of the dangers close at hand, Australia still continues to fulfill her pledge to the British Empire and to the Crown, and continues to send her men overseas. For Australians know well that wherever the forces of aggression may strike, there is the first line of defense of all free men. Time marches on.